3 years, huh? My chopsticks are rusty. That's the first time anybody's ever said that to me.
Well, it's a bit of a change for the Cabaret Conversations, but I thought, how could we not have an overture with our guest this evening? Welcome, everyone, to Cabaret Conversations, the 92nd Street Y School of Music. As always, I am your host, Michael Kirk Lane, and I'm so excited for tonight, our October 2022 edition of the series. Our guest tonight is an 8-time MAC Award winner, 3-time Bistro, 2-time Nightlife, 2-time Broadway World Award winner. He has performed all over the world, from Carnegie Hall to Australia, where he was nominated for the Helpman Award. He's also a Drama Desk and Lucille Lortel Award nominee. Please welcome to Cabaret Conversations, Mr. Mark Nadler. Hi, Mark.
Hi, Michael.
Oh, I'm so thrilled to have you as part of this series.
Watching that, wow.
That was from your Broadway Hootenanny that ran at Sardi's for 3 years, right?
Yeah, it ran for 5 years.
5 years.
Yeah. And I'm 3 years in a row and then 2 additional years not in a row. And the interesting thing is this week is the Cabaret Convention. And that number that you played was the very first number I performed at the Cabaret Convention. And I had just been booked at Sardi's. This was 1997. I had just been booked at Sardi's. And I had to advertise it. And to be perfectly honest, which is all I ever am, Donald Smith, who ran the Cabaret Convention, really didn't like me very much. And he was never going to book me. And somebody got sick. I was living in LA at the time, but I was in New York and I was about to start working at Sardi's, and somebody got sick. And he desperately needed someone. And so he took a chance on me, and I did that number, which is part of my version of I Love a Piano. And after that, people started coming to Sardi's because they knew who I was, and it sort of spread like wildfire. That number sort of made my New York City comeback. It was quite an incredible thing for you to start with that. And this week is the Cabaret Convention. So
yes, what nights are you performing?
Only one, just Friday night.
Friday night. if you don't have tickets yet, as Mark, it's always a fantastic experience. It's running Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday nights at Jazz at Lincoln Center from the Mabel Mercer Foundation, and that is the yearly cabaret convention. I'll be sitting in the audience on Wednesday and Thursday night, so I'm sad to miss you then.
Well, I'm sad you'll miss it too.
But I always enjoy seeing you whenever I can. Now, Mark, we always kind of start with how the guest got to New York, but your performing career very much began before you got to New York. Back in Iowa, do tell me about playing at the Long Straw Saloon.
Yeah, I mean, most of the people who are watching this know that there I am at the Long Straw Saloon. By that time, I was a seasoned veteran. I was, I think, 15 in that picture, but I started playing at the Long Straw Saloon when I was 10. And the reason was because I'm from Waterloo, Iowa, and I wanted to get out of Waterloo, Iowa. And so I got a job, and the job was playing piano and singing and dancing in this saloon. It was a real saloon. They had real saloon girls. I always say it was sort of Iowa's idea of a theme park. And
Mm.
it, it was a great job. Because of that job, I started as a professional in show business. I mean, I'd been performing at that point. I started performing when I was 5 or 4 or something like that. But I started getting paid for it when I was 10, when I started working at the Long Straw Saloon. And I saved up my money and I went away to the Interlochen Arts Academy and that put myself through school. And that's, yeah, so my career started as a professional out of desperation to get out of my hometown. That's really the
Mm.
truth.
And so that then took you to Interlochen in Michigan.
Yeah.
And you were there.
Interlochen, it's a high school, it's a boarding school for the performing arts. They also have a great summer camp, but this was the high school program, which is all year round, obviously. And I was there for all 4 years of my high school education, and that was my only education. I came to New York right after that when I was 17. When I was 17, it was a very good year.
What was that first year in New York like? What as you got here, because it was initially, was it an internship type situation that brought you
The
here?
first half year I was in New York, I was, it was a senior program as part of my education in Interlochen. And so I spent the first semester of my senior year uh, in New York as part of my education, and I was
Mm.
apprenticed to a theater company um, called the Writers Theater, run by a woman named Linda Laundra. And while I was here working apprenticed at the Writers Theater, I auditioned for a cabaret show down in the Village at a place that doesn't exist anymore called Scene One. And it was directed by a man who's no longer with us named Bobby Neeland. And Lenny Babish was the pianist, amazing pianist. I think he was playing for the great Martha Sanders at the time as well. I mean, he's just one of those like top of the line. I was lucky. I got in. It's funny. Sidney Meyer auditioned for the same show, and he came in just after I had auditioned, and they were sort of sold on me after I auditioned. They said, "That's who we want. That's what we want." And Sidney came in, and they said, "Well, you're very nice, but we already have a Jew," and that was it.
Oh,
It was another time. You were allowed
it,
to say things like that, but it was the truth. They didn't want to have, it wasn't, this wasn't the review at the shul. This was like, a diverse.
so you fell into cabaret really early.
Yeah, I felt, when I first came to New York and really to live here, my version of waiting tables, I came here to, like everybody else, to be a singer and a dancer on Broadway.
Mhm.
And my version of waiting tables, I never was a waiter. My version was to play in piano bars. And because of playing in these piano bars, I developed a following. Because I developed a following, I was able to book myself into the cabaret rooms. Because I was able to book myself into the cabaret rooms, and because of my following, actually make money doing it, because I played for myself. I didn't have to hire a director. I didn't have to hire a pianist. I actually made money doing it, and it started to become sort of cost prohibitive to not be a cabaret performer.
Mm.
I mean, I got to the point, not quickly, but quickly enough where it became a choice. Do you want to work in a, do you want to go out of town and work for some small theater company and get $300 a week? Or do you want to make $500 a night?
Right.
So that sort of became a no-brainer. And plus I was having so much fun. It's a lot of fun.
Well, and you learn so much about yourself working in the piano bars. Even, I don't play, but I've worked in the piano bars as a singer. And I think I learned the most about myself as a performer and who I am as an artist in those nights.
You learn not only about yourself, but the main thing I learned from working in the piano bars was how to hold and keep an audience.
Mhm.
And I knew directly if it was happening or not, not just by their attention, but by the amount of tips I made. And
Mhm.
I was living on that. So I had to learn this stuff. Also, while I was working in the piano bars, I mean, I had musical education. When I was a young child, my mother took me to the University of Northern Iowa and got me uh, lessons in composition and music theory and all of that stuff. I wasn't just studying the piano. And so I had all of that knowledge. But when I got into the piano bars and somebody shoves a piece of music in front of you and you have to read a chord chart and make
Mhm.
it sound like something, you have to know music theory. You have to be able to flesh all of that out. So that was my best training ground. And I did it for a long time. I made a vow to myself that when I turned 40, this was 21 years ago, when I turned 40, I would no longer work in the piano bars because it's so addictive. It's so much damn fun.
Yeah.
But I had to, like, you know, not spend my whole life doing that.
And
So,
it feeds your performer enough that you're not as hungry to go out and look for
well,
the
I mean,
next thing.
when I was working the piano bars, as I say, that was my version of waiting tables. So,
Mhm.
I mean, by the time I stopped working in piano bars, I had a manager and he was booking me all over the world and I was making very, very good money. And when I had a dry spell, I would go work in a piano bar. So I had to make this deal with myself that by the time I was 40, wouldn't do that anymore. Because I think it is a slightly self-destructive way of life. I mean, my shift in those bars was generally 9 p.m. to 3 a.m.,
Mhm.
10 p.m. to 4 a.m. When I worked at the Five Oaks, which was essentially a piano bar, a glorified piano bar, but my favorite job I ever had, it was my shift was 10 p.m. to 4 a.m.
Mhm.
And you can do that in your 20s and in your 30s. And I could have done it in my 40s, but there comes a time where you have to say, I want to be able to sustain this.
It gets harder.
Yeah, well, some things get harder as you age, some things don't.
As you were in those early years in New York and working the piano bars, and you had done the show with Bobby Nealon, who were the cabaret performers you were seeing that you were like, oh, I'm learning from them? Who were you
Yeah.
seeing at that point?
Well, for one thing, when I did that show, which was not a piano bar, this cabaret called Scene One, this show that we did, we had a guest artist named Selma Hazuri. Now, why she was a guest artist, I don't know, because we were all in the show together, but she had her own guest spot. She was like very much like Bette Midler, but frankly with a much stronger voice.
Mm.
But that same kind of body personality, big personality. She turned my head and got me thinking about some things. That first year I was in New York, Lena Horne did Lena Horne, the Lady in Her Music. And I went to see that 3 or 4 times. Even though I was making no money, I would save up all my money and eat nothing but Kraft mac and cheese for a week so I could go see her show. And I learned so much from watching that show and listening to the recording over and over again. Then it became available. It was on PBS, and I watched it on PBS. That show was a, a life lesson for me with regard to how to assemble a show, how to um, integrate your story into a show. I mean, look, we don't all have the life story of Lena Horne, but what made her show fascinating and exciting was not the Hollywood part. It was how deeply she incorporated her experience as a Black entertainer in a white entertainment industry. And as a gay Jew in what was at that time a very closeted industry, not the piano bars, of course, but the rest of show business, I related to that. I absolutely, I mean, when I was in Iowa, it was, I may as well have been a black person in a white person's industry. Being a gay Jew, it was
Mm,
very dicey. And so that Lena Horne's show changed my life. A woman named Dawn Hampton, one of the great singers of all time, but very few people know her. And she was a songwriter too, a good songwriter. Julie Wilson, I
mm,
saw her pretty early on and had a whole new idea of what was possible with regard to telling a story in 32 bars.
mhm.
Dawn Hampton, of course, was an unparalleled genius at telling a story in 32 bars. And Julie was that way. And then as I got deeper into the business, these people, Dawn Hampton and Julie Wilson, became really close friends. And when you get to be friends with people like that, you learn.
Mhm.
I can't even begin to tell you how much you learn. It's just they are walking. It's like living in school all the time, just
Yeah.
being with them. Yeah. So those were my early life changing things.
What, as you were in the piano bars and putting on your own cabaret shows in those early years, what was it that really drew you to this art form? I know you said, you started making more money in this than you would have doing
Well,
regional theater,
I
but
started
you,
doing cab- I started doing cabaret shows because when you're working in the piano bars, you're flying by the seat of your pants
mm,
and you have to work so hard for everybody's attention. I wanted to be in a place where A, I had put the show together in advance and worked on it, and B, they were there to pay attention. They
mhm,
were not there to order dinner or have a drink or pick up a date or whatever people do in piano bars that I always had to fight against. They
mhm,
were there to see me do a show. And as I said, I came to New York wanting to be in musical theater. That was as close to being in a rehearsed Broadway show as I could get without being in one or off Broadway show. As it turned out, I did work off Broadway. I did work on Broadway,
mhm,
but I found cabaret ultimately to be more rewarding. KT Sullivan, my good friend and who I worked with a lot, um, we shared many a dressing room, and she always used to say, can you imagine if we had to be singing the score or even listening to the score to Cats 8 times a week?
mm,
And it's true. I came this close to being cast as Rum Tum Tugger. And when she said that, I thought, oh my God, she's so right. My whole life would have been so different if I
yeah.
hadn't been able to choose the songs that I want to perform and sing only the great songs, the songs that I think are great, but instead have to make my living singing songs that I loathe. Not that I
Mhm.
loathe all of Cats, although frankly I do. But
Well, we've got Bad Cinderella coming up this season, so we'll
I,
see.
yippee, woohoo!
You have a very, and have honed over the years in cabaret, a very unique performance style and voice. Is that something you have done purposefully, or is that something that has just come naturally?
That's my voice. That's my voice. I've taken a lot of voice lessons. I I've taken from great teachers, but this is my voice. Partially, I think, because I started so young and I
Hmm.
started belting so young. I never developed nodes, but I've always had this sort of rasp in my voice. I was playing at a hustler bar on 53rd Street called Rounds. It was a piano bar, but it was a hustler bar. And all of these, I mean, David Geffen and Andy Warhol and these kind of people would come into this place. And there was this man named Ashley. This was when I was 21, 22. This man named Ashley who would stand at the piano, blonde. He was probably 70 something, blonde, done blonde hair. And he would always come in a navy blue blazer, white pants, even in winter. He would stand at the piano, he would lean on the piano, and he would say to me, You're chic. You have that Elaine Stritch crack in your voice. I thought, good, glad to know it. Put some money in my tip jar.
And more than just also the instrument itself, I also mean your style and what you bring to a performance piece.
I honestly don't know what you're talking about. So if you want to tell me
Oh,
what you're talking about, I'll address it.
I think your performance style is so uniquely you, and maybe it's just because you're so honestly you on stage that
Well,
it's
I
not
think that
something that's
that's the most
curated.
important thing you can be. And I learned that, of course, from the great Julie Wilson, from the
Mhm.
great Dawn Hampton, and other people. Also another thing that happens when you're in a piano bar and somebody like Martha Sanders comes in and gets up and sings, and you see not only this powerhouse instrument, but this person is so uniquely herself. You learn, there's a good idea. Why don't I do that? You know,
Mhm.
so, you see this in the piano bar,
Yeah.
and you learn that what works is authenticity, whatever that is, whatever that is. And so, yeah, thank you. I would like to believe that I am just authentically me. I do invest a lot in every song emotionally,
Mhm.
especially the comedy material, frankly. And when I say invest, I mean I generally have a pretty strong and thoroughly worked out backstory
Mhm.
that comes from my personal experience to light the fire of the song. And so that probably makes for a style that would make me unique because it's my story that I'm telling.
Mhm.
I studied writing when I was living in LA. I studied sitcom writing from a man named Bill Idelson, incredible writer. He was the head writer on The Odd Couple, the TV show The Odd Couple, but he also wrote on the Dick Van Dyke Show. He wrote up for On the Family. Great, great sitcom writer. And he taught me and all of us what is the definition of a story. And so when you know specifically what is a story, you apply that. And so I now make my songs, I try to make every song a story. It has
Mhm.
a hero, it has an obstacle. The hero has to get past that obstacle for something that the hero wants so badly. And what the teacher taught me is the bigger the obstacle and the more the person wants what they want, the better the story. So it's about making the stakes high.
Mhm.
So I try to apply that to songs.
When you were at Interlochen, what was your focus?
I was an acting major.
Mhm.
I was a piano and dance and voice minor. I had three minors. And frankly, my focus when I was at Interlochen was being on my own, not being in Waterloo, Iowa, being a gay boy in a art school, being a Jew in an art school. I was living the life. This was
Mhm.
1976 to 1980, and I was just living it up.
But
And yeah,
the
I
way
mean, I
you're
was
talking
straight.
about all of this from the sitcom teacher, but also your approach is very much an actor's approach to the material.
Yeah, I would say that that is my approach. And I would say that you could say the same thing about Julie Wilson and
Mhm.
Dawn Hampton, even though Dawn never studied acting, she never needed to. But yeah, and Lena Horne,
Mhm.
by the way, and Bette Midler, and you name it. The great cabaret performers, Barbara Streisand, Judy Garland. I know I'm leaving out men just because I I tend to gravitate to the women, and I know
Mhm.
there are great, great male singers as well. I mean, even Sinatra, and I'm not a huge Sinatra fan, I'll be honest with you, but when he's at his best, it's because of his acting.
Mhm.
Yeah, that voice is, people love that voice, but his acting of the song is what gets him. I would
And
say that
I mean,
that's
he
what
attributes that to Mabel.
Mabel Mercer, yeah,
Yep.
I know that. Well, he attributes his phrasing to me. He
Phrasing. Yeah.
attributed his
His
phrasing to
phrasing,
Mabel Mercer. I don't know that he attributed
his
his
acting. Yeah.
acting of a song to Mabel Mercer. But I mean, I was a huge Bobby Short fan, but for very different reasons. Bobby never acted a song.
Mhm.
He did exactly the opposite. He put a patina of glamour on every syllable that he sang and every note that he played. But acting, no, not at all. Not at all.
You mentioned your sitcom teacher in LA. Are there other people, once you made the transition to New York, who you think of as your great teachers? Whether it was formal study or not.
Well, Dawn Hampton and Julie Wilson. Mm-hmm. And I also had a great teacher in LA, Charles Nelson Riley. He was my acting teacher in LA. And I learned so much from him. There was an acting teacher named Mervyn Nelson in New York who I learned so much from. Voice teachers, not so much. I studied with Shirley Calloway, who is the mother of Liz Calloway and Ann Hampton Calloway, and she's a wonderful teacher for vocal technique, wonderful teacher for vocal technique. She knew better than to try to coach me in acting a song or performing a song. But by that time I was studying with her, I was already very well established. Other teachers, I mean, I learned from everybody I work with. I'm also a director. And when I direct somebody, I learn so much from them. I learn from the things that they know that I don't know. And I learn from mistakes that they make. That I'm sitting out and I'm watching what they're doing. And I'm analyzing it so I can help them to do a better performance, give a better performance. And in doing that, then I apply it to myself. So yeah, I learned a lot. I've learned a lot from KT. I've learned a lot from KT Sullivan because we worked together so much. And she has an awful lot of knowledge. And a lot of it is intuitive. She studied hard and she studied a lot, but a lot of it is intuitive, and it's in her intuitive knowledge that it's from that I learned the most.
Well, I think it's time for our next clip.
Ooh, a clip.
A clip?
Hey, everybody, I hope you have a drink. Please have a drink. These clips are going to kill us.
They're not going to kill us.
Minimum. It's a 2-drink minimum when you're watching Mark Nadler.
Well, this is from the 1990 Mac Awards.
Oh, no. Wait a minute. Is this New Orleans, Louisiana Blues?
It sure is.
Dawn Hampton wrote this song.
Which is why it is next, since you have named her.
Ladies and gentlemen, will you please welcome Mark Nadler.
Thank you. How do you like the costume? I'm going to do a song for you that was written by Dawn Hampton and Robert Pico. Rampart Streets, old jazz beats, all are bringing thoughts of you. Matters know where I go, don't know what to do. I just can't seem to forget about that New Orleans night we met. I guess I got New Orleans, Louisiana blues. Rice and beans, Cajun Queens, New Orleans is on my mind. Matters know where I go, no more like her can I find. I just cannot seem to erase memories of that smiling face. I guess I got New Orleans, Louisiana blues. It's an epidemic. I can't lose New Orleans or Louisiana. I can't lose New Orleans or Louisiana. Oh, yeah.
A blast
So
from
I
the
want to
past.
tell you, Michael, this is how far the cabaret world has come. So I won the Mac Award that year, and it looked like this. This, can you see it?
Oh,
This
yeah.
little, this little pendant, not pendant, like thing that you wear around your neck, this was the Mac Award. This was it. It's in its little case. I keep it in its case, but that was it. It was this little thing that you were supposed to wear on a like a locket or something around your neck. That was the Mac Award. Then eventually it became this, and I have several of these. Frankly, I think these are the best looking ones. And how many of these do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4. I have 5 of these. These are the good ones. And then I have a few of these. This is what it is now.
Mm-hmm.
And what's beautiful about this is it's not made of glass, it's made of plexiglass. So you can use it to scrape your windshield. And this is the most practical one. The current
Yes.
one. The current.
I'm sure that was thought of when it
that's
got
how far
switched to
the
that
cabaret-
design.
I'm sorry?
I'm sure that was thought of as they switched to that design.
So that's how far we've come in the cabaret world. In
As-
just 30 years.
As you are approaching a new project, what's the spark or what's the thing that draws you to a new idea? And how do you take that new idea from conception? What's your process to take it to a full show?
I'm looking for ideas all the time. So for example, I read a book, I'll read a book just for the fun of it, but as I'm reading it, I'll think, this could be an interesting cabaret show. I read one recently, I don't want to say what, but it's not, let's just say it's not an autobiography of Larry Hart. You know, KT and I did so many of those shows that were, frankly, retrospectives of dead songwriters, that I really try to avoid that. I know it's very popular in our field, and they're wonderful shows, and it's great to learn about the people who wrote these songs. I mean, look, this whole bookcase is just full of nothing but songs by those people. But I'm always trying to look for something that's not that. And frankly, I'm also generally trying to look for something that's not something I ever did before. I want to do something that I never did before. And so I'm always looking. Now, the last show I did, for example, Heart's Desire, which is, right, it's a 2-act musical. It's not really even a cabaret show. It's a musical. It's a 2-act musical in which I play 8 interacting characters, all from the piano. And that show I put together because it was a commission. I was hired to create a show for a theater company, a gay theater company in San Francisco, the oldest producer of gay theater in San Francisco, in the United States. It's called Theater Rhinoceros. And they said, we want a Larry Hart show. And I just didn't want to do a retrospective of Larry Hart and, about the life of Larry Hart, which people who know this music all know that story and I love his songs and I love his story, but I wanted to do something different. So I thought, well, what if I do a show that has songs by Larry Hart and patter by Moss Hart? Because I'm a big fan of Moss Hart, and Moss Hart was also, he was bisexual, but he was in the gay world, closeted, as they all were. They said, oh, we love that. And as I was reading the Moss Hart plays and rereading Act 1, I thought, well, I think what really needs to happen here is not that he's going to do the patter, because I don't see that happen. I couldn't find a way to make that happen out of the dialogue from these plays. And I said, well, what if I just do a 2-act musical and I'll play all the parts? And they said, okay, do that. So that's how I got myself into that fine mess. But I mean, other things. I have a show that I have to do that I'm looking forward to doing. My next show, as a matter of fact, is going to be, are you ready for this? There is a temple in Houston that wants a cabaret show about an hour and 15 minutes uh, of the entire history of Jews in show business.
In an hour and 15 minutes?
I'm going to have to sing fast. I know. So, but that's my next challenge, and that's what I'm going to be doing, and that's because I got like the old story says, what comes first, the music or the lyrics, the contract.
Right.
And so in the case of this next show, and in the case of this last show, it was the contract. The show that I have this great idea from the book I read, it's going to have to go on the back burner again. Actually, I read that book a year and a half ago.
Is there, because you had a very successful run of Heart's Desire, is there a future for that show, do you think? Or do you think that one's now stopped where it is?
I don't know. I was wrong in assuming that you don't need to obtain the rights to plays when you do a cabaret show. The reason I thought that is because you don't need to obtain the rights to songs when you play in cabarets, because cabarets pay for what's called an ASCAP BMI license.
All of the rooms have the license.
I was stupid to not know this, but I didn't put it together that it doesn't cover plays. Why would it? It's ASCAP BMI. So in order to do it further, I would have to obtain the rights to every play Moss Hart wrote, because they're all represented in this show that I did. It's not just one play. It's from I put all of his plays together the way that I put all the songs together from various musicals of Larry Hart. So I have to obtain the rights in order to be able to do it further. It's very expensive. It's a lot of work. I may want to do that. So I'm not saying it won't happen, but it's more complicated than any of my other shows. Now, interestingly, when Katie and I were playing at the Algonquin, we did a Comden and Green show. And my idea for that show was, because Condon and Green not only wrote great lyrics, they also wrote some of our favorite screenplays, Singing in the Rain, The Bandwagon, On the Town. So I said, why don't we do our show as like a mini 1-hour musical where we put all of their movies plots together and weave the songs into it, and you play a character and I'll play a character, you play the hero and I'll play the hero. And so that's what we did for that show. And we used lots of dialogue from those movies. And Phyllis Newman, of course, came to see it, who was married to Adolph Green. He had passed by then. But she loved it, and she never said a word about obtaining the rights. And so it never occurred to me that I would have to obtain the rights for Heart's Desire. So I really don't know if I'm going to be able to do it again. If I do, it's going to mean that I have to hire a lawyer
and you go through all of that. Ooh. How did the partnership with KT begin? And talk about how that's grown over the years.
KT came to see me when I was performing at Adams Rib on 72nd Street and First Avenue. There was a cabaret room in the back of Adams Rib. KT came to see me. And because she had come to see me, this is how it works in our world, I went to see her. And my partner at the time, my romantic partner, was booking the room. And I saw KT and I said, wait till you see this woman. She's unbelievable. You're going to love her. She'll do great business, and she's a very unique talent. And so he did book her. And the way the room worked was you got paid a salary. There was no cover charge at Adams Rib. You got paid a salary. And you could use that salary to hire an accompanist, or you could hire me because you could use me because I was hired by the room and not have to pay for your accompanist. So she used me as her accompanist. And from the first rehearsal, we just hit it off. She hates to rehearse, so it was more like a party. And, I was at that point a very good sight reader. And so she'd put something in front of me. I read it, sounded great. We'd go have lunch. and, and we became very good friends. I then moved to LA, and very soon after that. And my partner, that man who was the person who booked that room, who I had been with for a long time, had contracted HIV, and he developed full-blown AIDS while we were in LA. And I was desperate to get back to New York because I didn't want him to die in LA. He hated LA. And I was working in piano bars. I moved to LA because a manager said I was a shoo-in for sitcoms. Have you seen me in any? And then I just worked piano bars, and I had a show at the Cinegrill, which a weekly variety show at the Cinegrill, which was very similar to what I ended up doing at Sardi's. It didn't pay enough for me not to work in piano bars, but KT came out to LA. She saw how I was living. She saw what I was having to do in order to make a living. And she did something incredibly generous. She started using me as her accompanist wherever she was booked. And she would always give me 50% of her salary, no matter what she made, so that I could afford to move back to New York City. And, how could you not become a great friend with somebody who does that for you?
Yeah.
And also we played Brownville, Nebraska together a lot, which sounds like nothing, but it's because I'm from Waterloo, Iowa, and she's originally from Boggy Depot, Oklahoma, but her family came from, well, at that time they were living in Norman, Oklahoma. Brownville, Nebraska was halfway. So my parents would come to Brownville, and her parents would come to Brownville, and we all got to know each other and became great friends. So it's become a very great friendship. In 1998, I suggested to her that I wanted to do a Gershwin show with her because I thought that our take on Gershwin would be unique. And she agreed, and we put together this 2-act Gershwin show that eventually became the off-Broadway show American Rhapsody, that ran for 9 months and was nominated for all sorts of awards and won some awards. And doing a 2-act review, sharing a dressing room with somebody 8 times a week off Broadway, you really get to become either very, very close friends or you hate each other for life. So that was when we started a working partnership as co-stars. And then after that, she was already working at the Algonquin as a headliner when she invited me to join her to do a show. And I did, and it was a huge hit. And we were a huge hit as a couple. We were sort of the Fred and Ginger of the cabaret world. And we did eventually 6 shows at the Algonquin, and we would still be there if they still had the Oak Room.
Well, I didn't think we could have a chat about you and your career in cabaret without a clip of you and KT together.
Bring it on.
So here is from the 2005 MAC Awards.
Oh, it's all the MAC Awards.
And one moment, as I have to set up the clips.
I'm curious what we did in 2005. Is this maybe? Well, we'll see. Oh, here's Doug.
Now, are you glad you came?
You'll be swell. You'll be great. Gonna have the whole world on a plate.
Starting here, starting now.
Honey, everything's coming up roses.
Clear the decks,
Clear the deck.
clear the tracks.
Clear the track.
We've got nothing
Nothing
to do take a bow. Honey, everything's coming up roses. Love's stand the world on its ear, set it spinning. That'll be just the but the heights will be swell. You'll be great,
I can tell.
just you wait.
That lucky star I talk about is
Everything's coming up. Everything's coming up. Curtain up like the lights. We got nothing to hit but the heights. You'll be swell. Wait and see. There's a bell. Follow me. And nothing's gonna stop us till we're through. Honey, everything's coming up roses and daffodils.
Everything's coming up sunshine and Santa Claus.
Everything's coming up bright lights and lollipops. Everything's coming up roses for me and for you.
You know, I never saw that clip.
Oh,
And it was wonderful to see it. I haven't heard that arrangement in a long time. And, you know, a lot of, I think what you were asking about, what makes me unique is not just the acting that I bring to my work, but I do my own arrangements, and my arrangements come from that story that I'm talking about.
mhm.
And that was a really clear example of how I took a very well-known song and arranged it to tell our story that we were telling in that show. That was from our Julie Stein show. It was the first show we did at the Algonquin as a team. And that was the finale of that show. And we had been telling the story of Julie Stein's life, and we had talked about how we had gotten into the difficulties that he faced, but how he was such an optimist. He was just this completely optimistic guy. And it occurred to me as I was reading about him that he was born on New Year's Eve.
Mm.
And New Year's Eve of the whole year is the one night where there's nothing but optimism, nothing but hope, nothing but, it's all about what's coming in this next year. Everything else is gone. And so I wanted to have an arrangement of that song that fleshed out that story, that yes, it's tough, but I'm an optimist. Yes, it's tough, but I'm an optimist. And then I'm a fighter, and then I'm a winner. And because that was his story. So that was what that arrangement was about.
Mm.
Of course, it helps when you have somebody like KT who can sing anything that you give her, and not only sing it, but perform it. and loves to choose clothes that match mine.
Is that something you bring to your directing as well? Because you don't
Absolutely.
music direct everybody that you direct.
I music direct almost nobody that I direct, but as a director, I insist that I will do the arrangements. If not completely, then mostly, because that's what I bring to it. I
Mhm.
mean, don't hire me. Why hire me if you're not going to bring that to it? Hire Jeff Harner, who's a fantastic director, but doesn't do that. You know,
Mhm.
I mean, yeah, that's a big part of what I do.
Mark, what do you think the biggest changes you've witnessed in the art form or world of cabaret have been over the course of your career?
Well, it's, honestly, I mean, obviously, with the loss of places like the Oak Room and Feinstein's at the Regency, and there was a wonderful place called Archie's. With the loss of these rooms, people have, and really with the loss of uh, the New York Times coverage of
Mhm.
cabaret, the fact that the New York Times no longer gives editorial space for cabaret reviews, that has really changed the game, because in order for people to get people to come hear them, they have to do other things. So, for example, 54 Below is very different than any cabarets were. The ballroom wasn't that way. The Oak Room wasn't that way at the Algonquin. Even Feinstein's at the Regency and the Carlisle were not that way. 54 Below is now calling itself Broadway's Cabaret. And it is a place where people who are in Broadway shows can put together an act and do their act. And because they are a Broadway performer, 54 Below can sell tickets to that without having to have a New York Times review. So that's changed the game. And it's changed when the Oak Room was in its prime at the Algonquin, people like Karen Akers and Andrea Marcovici and KT and me and Michael Feinstein and uh, Eric Comstock was there for a while. I mean, the headliners who were there all the time, Paula West, what we were told to do, we were instructed by the woman, Barbara McGurn, who booked that room, as to what we were going to do, what the show was going to be.
Mm.
You're going to do a show of Cole Porter. You're going to do a show of Dorothy Fields, and it has to be called A Fine Romance because our people want to hear love songs. And I mean, she dictated all of that.
Mm.
And so then we had all the license in the world to turn those shows into whatever we wanted. But because that's no longer the audience, people are no longer going to any club to hear particularly love songs from the Great American Songbook. That's not what they're going for. So people don't have to do that anymore. They're not doing it. They're doing other things.
Mm.
When I was first coming up, way back in the early 80s, cabaret shows were the opposite of that. It was, people were laughing about these theme shows. Why is everybody doing a theme show? You did an evening of songs like Bette Midler at the Baths. That's what you wanted to do. You wanted to entertain, and that's what I wanted to do. But, we found out that if you want to book yourself on the road and you want to make a living, and nobody's heard of Mark Nadler, they have heard of Julie Stein. They have heard of Dorothy Fields. They have heard of Cole Porter. So these shows you could make big money with. Richard Rodgers, the Gershwins, Irving Berlin. And then, of course, the challenge was, how do you do a show of those people and make it yours and make it unique and make it not, how do I make KT's in my show not what Andrea is doing? How do I make my show about Cole Porter different than Karen Akers' show about Cole Porter? I was running a room called the Beach Cafe a few years ago, just before the pandemic. I booked it and I helped create it. We had Cabaret there, and I inaugurated the season just for fun. With it was a whole summer, and every week there was a different great cabaret performer doing their Cole Porter show. The whole summer was Cole Porter, because there are that many different ways to do, just like any jazz standard. You can do it 1,000 different ways. Well, you can do 1,000 different takes on a show about Cole Porter, and that's what we celebrated. And it was actually people loved it. They came every week to see the different takes on the same songs.
What do you think the biggest challenge that our art form faces right now is?
It's the same challenge that it's always faced, and that is getting people to trust and take a leap of faith, to shell out money and to shell out time, to give up an evening to come see somebody they've never heard of, and to come experience something in live entertainment that you're not going to be able to go back to Omaha and say, oh, I saw the great Lori Krause. Well, she is great, but nobody in Omaha is going to care. It's not like going back and say, I saw Phantom, I saw Hamilton. So for people, and even people who live in New York City, to take that leap of faith and go see somebody that they've never heard of. Now, oftentimes what's going to happen, because one of the things about cabaret is anybody can do it. All you need is enough money to hire a pianist and enough gumption to convince Sidney Meyer to book you. And a lot of times you're going to go see a show of somebody you've never heard of. And listen, this happened at the Algonquin too. There were people who were playing there, and somebody would go see their show, and these were very, very well-known performers and very established performers. And I know people who went there and said, that's cabaret, I'm never going again. It is potluck. You are taking a chance. It may not be something you're going to love. And unfortunately with cabaret, it's interesting, with Broadway, you go and see a really rotten Broadway show. It doesn't keep you from ever going to see another Broadway show. But for some reason with cabaret, you see a rotten cabaret show and it's your first show. You say, okay, I paid that dues, I'm never going to do that again. That happens a lot. And I think that's the big thing that we're fighting all the time. We're fighting the lack of the fear, the justified fear of the audience, of the potential audience. And we're fighting, frankly, the mediocrity or worse of a lot of cabaret performers, as you know.
Why do you think it is that some of these amazing performers who are, A-list Broadway names aren't successful when it comes to this art form?
Well, being an actor on Broadway is a very, very different thing than doing a cabaret show. Because as we've discussed, a cabaret show is all about you being you. And even if you're doing an evening of Marlene Dietrich and you're singing the songs of Marlene Dietrich, it's your take on Marlene Dietrich. A Broadway actor is playing a role. And I have a lot of friends who are Broadway actors, and they say, boy, I could never do what you do. I'd be scared to death to get up there and have to, I mean, I have a really good friend. I'll even say Marta Sanders' sister-in-law, Marianne Plunkett, is one of the great Broadway singing actresses. She won a Tony for Me and My Girl. She's an amazing singer, an amazing actress. She said to me, I'd be scared to death. I said, Marianne, why don't you do a cabaret show? She said, I'd be scared to death. I have no role to play. I have to play me. Well, that's true of a lot. And a lot of the people who are less savvy than Marianne don't know that they can't do it. It's very hard when you're used to playing a role to get up there and not play a role, or to play an elevated version of you, which is a role, but it's still very different than.
When I'm teaching, I steal the term from. Do you remember that Broadway show a decade or so ago, Title of Show?
Yeah.
And they were all playing the versions of themselves.
Yeah.
And they said they were playing the bunny ears version of themselves in quotes.
That's great.
That's what I use now when I'm teaching, is that it's a version of yourself.
Yeah, Bette Midler famously talked about how she's a very, very shy woman, and she always has been. But she created this character, the Divine Miss M, that is an extremely elevated version of herself. And when I found that out, that was a lesson.
Who are the artists out there today that if somebody came to New York, it's like, I need to see a cabaret show and Mark Nadler's not performing, who should I go see? Who exemplifies this art form right now to you?
Well, there are so many. And if I answer that question, I'm going to get a lot of trouble because I'm going to leave someone out, because you always do. But because Martha Sanders is here and watching this, and she is truly one of the greats, she's out there doing it, I would say she's one of them for sure. Lori Krause is a wonderful singer. She's here, she's watching this. I would say, I mean, there are so many, and that's why the Cabaret Convention has such a hard time picking and choosing who's going to perform. I mean, dear close friends of mine, Heather McRae is one of the great singers. She's not performing as much, but when she does, if you catch her, you'll be glad you did. Jeff Harner is terrific. Eric Comstock and Barbara Fasano have their own kind of magic. There are so many wonderful performers out there. At KT, of course. When Leanne Borghese is in town,
Yes.
she lives in San Francisco, but oh my God, if you missed that show at your own peril, because she is so great. She is truly so great. There are so many. It would be well, Christine Andreas.
Yes.
Christine Andreas is, and she came from the world of Broadway, but she's so deeply authentic, and her voice is so sublime. She's one of the all-time greats. If you get a chance to see her, if you do, these are people that it's like Dawn Hampton. You know, I talk about Dawn Hampton all the time. I feel so sad for the people who never took a chance and missed seeing this woman do what she did. She was a very short, very round black woman. And she would get up. She had no voice at all. She had had surgery and lost her voice completely. No voice. She would get up and she had no patter. She would never say a word. Just song after song after song. Each song was an opera. It could be so funny that you peed your pants. When she sang Losing My Mind, Sondheim's Losing My Mind, it was the first time I saw her. This was when I was at Interlochen, and we came to New York for a senior off-campus trip, and I went to a piano bar. It was across the street from, it was at the, in the Edison Hotel, and Houston Allred was at the piano. And this little short woman with this diamond stuck on her forehead, this little black woman, gets up, and it's a piano bar. Everybody's talking, and she starts singing Losing My Mind, Sondheim. I'm looking around, and I'm watching this woman, and you could hear the crowd sort of like a vacuum. The vacuum sucked the crowd in. The crowd just stopped talking. They started looking, what's going on here? I was certain that this woman actually was losing her mind, that I was watching a person go crazy in front of me. And it completely changed my entire perspective as to what a live performance could be. And I went up to her and I gave her, wrote my name and phone number and address on a piece of paper and gave it to her. She said, "Can I put you on my mailing list?" I said, "Yeah." Then when I was working at the Five Oaks 5 years later, she came in. I recognized her immediately. The next night she came back and she still had that piece of paper. And we became friends. But yeah, but I feel so sad for the people who will never have experienced her as a live performer. And there are so many in the cabarets today that people are going to have to take a chance if they want to see the greats. Because they're not going to read about it in the Times. They're not going to see them on the Tonight Show. There's no Tonight Show. They're not going to see them on TV. You got to take a chance. just like love.
Because of our time constraints tonight, we couldn't talk about so many of your hit shows over the years. Of
It's
course,
all right.
Tchaikovsky and Other Russians, and I'm a Stranger Here Myself, and Broadway Hootenanny Sardi's. Is there one show over the course of the years that you think back on, it's like, that's my greatest hit?
Well, you always think the last thing you did is your greatest hit.
Mhm.
This year is the 10-year anniversary since I did Crazy 1961, which was to celebrate my 50th birthday. And it's the 11th anniversary. And that show was a very clever show. I was very proud of that. I'm a Stranger Here Myself is a show because I did it at the York Theater as an off-Broadway production, and because it was nominated for awards and won awards. That's a show that, more of all the shows I've done, that's the one that people say to me the most, when are you going to do that one again? And that was a very powerful show. It was a retrospective of the songwriters of the Weimar Republic who wrote for the Weimar Cabarets. And eventually the show develops into being the story of how my grandmother got my family out of Nazi Germany. And that's what makes it powerful, is my personal story through the songs. So yeah, that's the one that people ask for the most. But
we're sadly running to the end of my time before I turn it over to the audience for questions. I'm going to ask you one more question myself, and then we'll have one more clip before we go to the audience. Audience, at that point, I will, if you want to ask, you can turn your camera on and I'll call on you, or you can submit your question in the chat if you don't want to ask it yourself.
Submit to Michael Kirkley.
And I will ask it for you. Mark, every one of these Cabaret Conversations, we're now in our third year, has ended with the exact same question. And I can send you the links. Everybody's answer is out there now.
Mine'll be the missing link.
In a sentence, in a couple of words, what is cabaret?
Well, I can't do it in a couple of words.
Sentence, couple sentences.
Cabaret is a music-based art form that is centric to the person performing it. The person, it's person or duo or trio, but the people performing it are what the show is the whole point, is everything that the show is. Everything comes from the people who are doing it. It's all about the people who are doing it. That's all it is. And it's music-based. It's not a monologue. And if somebody does a monologue in a cabaret, that doesn't make it a cabaret show. It's music-based. But that's it.
All right, good. Our final clip tonight is from during the pandemic when you were doing daily videos.
Oh, yeah.
Of songs. And I just thought this was a good message to end us.
So for those who don't know, can I just quickly say what this was?
Of course.
While we were in lockdown, from the very first day that we were in lockdown, I put a list of subscribers together. I sent out an email, said, do you want this? And I sent out every day, every day that we were in lockdown. I did this every day until we were allowed to leave our homes and go out again, which was a few months. Every day I sent out a different song. Every day was a different song. And I'm curious as to which day you chose, because while I was doing this, I actually had COVID for the first, not for the first couple, but like soon after I started doing it, I had COVID. And I had to like gather my strength, get dressed, figure out how I was going to do a number that wasn't going to kill me, do a number and pass out and go back to bed. So yeah, that was like, so I'm curious to see if one of the songs you chose is one of those.
Well, here we are.
I had a request to do some Harold Arlen, and I love Harold Arlen. This song seems particularly appropriate to what we're going through, although probably more due to the Johnny Mercer lyric than the Harold Arlen melody. But either way, it's a really good one. Everybody gather round me while I preach some. Feel a sermon coming on me. The topic will be sin, and that's what I'm again. If you want to hear my story, then settle back and just sit tight while I start reviewing the attitude of doing right. You gotta accentuate the positive, eliminate the negative, latch on to the affirmative, don't mess with Mr. In Between. You've gotta spread joy up to the maximum and bring gloom down to a minimum. Have faith or pandemonium is liable to step upon the scene. To illustrate my last remark, Jonah in the whale, Noah in the ark. What did they do just when everything looked so dark? And they said we better accentuate the positive, eliminate the negative, latch on to the affirmative, don't mess with Mr. In Between, don't mess with Mr. In Between. You've got to start accenting the positive, eliminating the negative, latch on to the affirmative, don't mess with Mr. In Between. Spread joy to the maximum, bring gloom to the minimum, or pandemonium will step on the scene to illustrate my last remark. Jonah in the whale, Noah in the dark. Well, what did they do when everything looked so dark? They said, we better accentuate the positive, and we better eliminate the negative. We gotta latch on to the affirmative and don't mess with Mr. In Between. Don't mess with Mr. In Between. Keep it up.
That was my amazing guest for this evening, Mark Nadler. We're going to turn to audience questions now. Suzanne, I see you have turned your camera on, so you are welcome to unmute and ask your question.
But I just want to say one thing. There's a great singer who has been on this thing tonight named Meg Flather, one of the great singers, and I should have talked about her when you asked me who we should be seeing when we go to the cabaret. She's really, truly one of the greats. Anyway, sorry. Hey!
I wanted to just say it's not really a question because I think Mark knows everything in the world there is to know about Cabaret, and every day I know Mark, I'm more fascinated by him, so I adore him. And you, Michael, good questions, and you may not know this, but there is a Mark Nadler West Coast fan club, of which represented by me and one other person. We're in a wasteland out here, but it so happened that for Cabaret, not for culture, but for Cabaret. And I've always loved Cabaret. And it so happened that a few years ago, I had an opportunity to see he and KT here in Monterey, where I live. And I thought I was transported. I was completely struck. I fell in love with both of them. I follow both of them. And in the interim, I've just come to love Mark very much. And I just think I'm so happy to see your wonderful face, and I miss you, and when I'm in New York, I'll see you again. And thank you, Michael.
And by the way, Suzanne's niece, Farrah Alvin.
Oh, yes.
It's a star in New York.
Great cabaret singer.
Great performer, yes.
Star.
Yeah.
That's my girl. Yeah. Anyway, I'm linked. I'm linked to the business.
Thank you, Suzanne.
Thank you for taking
I met Suzanne because Barbara Brussel, great all-time cabaret singer.
Barbara Brussel brought them to me, to us.
Michelle, you have your hand raised. Do you want to turn your camera on or unmute, and you can ask your question?
Well, it's Mitch. My wife is.
I'm sorry, Mitch.
Computer, but no, I just wanted to say, Mark, I've been following you for probably over 20 years. The first time I saw you was at Carramore when I was living in New York. I'm up in DC now. Tomorrow I'm taking a bus down up to New York, and I'll be seeing you Friday night, hopefully. And the last time I saw you was in Baltimore
Oh, yes,
before the
sure.
pandemic. You know, I'm the guy who started singing all the Cole Porter lyrics.
The guy, because that never happens.
Yeah, well, anyway,
Great to see you, Mitch. I wish I could see you.
I'd love to figure out how this stupid computer works. But anyway, I also want to thank you for those songs of the day. I watched every one during the pandemic. So
Thank you.
we have all your wonderful fans here. I'm one of them. Just want to say that.
Thank you.
So,
And by the way, that song that Michael played was not one when I had COVID. I was healthy.
Thank you for joining us tonight, Mitch.
okay.
And I was
Meg,
thinking while I was watching that, the reason that I now have silver hair, I call this my COVID silver lining, because you noticed in all of those clips you showed, I had dark hair. Well, I was dyeing my hair. I hated it, sitting in that fucking chair with this. The woman who dyes your hair always wants to talk to you. It was awful. And then because we had to stay home and people were watching me every single day with my hair getting grayer and grayer and grayer and grayer, now I don't have to color my hair. It's like the best thing that ever happened.
I'm just curious. I was watching your face as the clips were being played, and I was just wondering what was going through your mind.
Well, it depends on the clip. I mean, the one with KT and me doing Everything's Coming Up Roses, I had never seen that clip. So I was sort of marveling at what a great performer KT is. And I was enjoying my arrangement. I thought, you know what, damn, that's a good arrangement of that song.
Thank you, Mitch. Meg, you had messaged that you've got a question, so you can go next.
Yes, my question, you beautiful man, is
No, show us how beautiful you are.
well,
Show us.
for some reason this video thing is not working. I'm keeping
Because
on.
MF in my world does not stand for Meg Flather.
I'm trying to not. I'm trying to show the video, but it's not working. So
Okay.
it will work. But
There
anyway,
you
There it is.
am I coming through? Okay. Well, anyway. Oh, here I am. Okay. So 2 questions.
There's Helene. Helene's my photographer.
So 2 questions, Mr. Mark. First one
Got it.
is, how did you become so comfortable being so physical and I mean, you're more than a pianist when you accompany yourself. So there's never looking at the keyboard, and then there's dance that happens and getting up. How did you train yourself? Because I've never seen a pianist accompany himself be able to do what you do physically as an entertainer behind the piano. So that's the first question. And then the second question is, how do you navigate, since you make your living this way, the huge risks you take to challenge your audience when you do challenge your audience? Go.
Well, to answer your first question, I honestly don't know, because that's how I've always done it. I started out as a singing, acting dancer, and I did play the piano from the time I was 4, but only as a means to eventually, hopefully, be able to sing and act and dance. And so I was always very physical. And also, this sounds ridiculous, but it's really true. I was a big fan of Bugs Bunny. And Bugs Bunny used to do these outrageous, like he'd go to the piano and he'd bring his arm up and then he'd play just one note. And so I actually emulated Bugs Bunny a lot when I started.
love this.
And it's funny, when I first came to New York, people used to compare me to Chico Marx all the time. And Victor Borge. And I was not a fan of, I had never seen Victor Borge. I knew the Marx Brothers films, they were fine. But really, Bugs Bunny was where that all came from. And maybe it's where it came from for Chico Marx too. I don't know. But anyway, no, I think Chico Marx preceded Bugs Bunny. But anyway, so that's, honestly, I just always did it that way. I was always physical.
And you don't even think about it, right? There's not even a hesitation when you're in that medium of playing the piano.
Well, Meg, I've been playing piano all my life, almost literally all my life. My brother says I was 3.5 when I started. He's 8 years older than I am. He says I was 3. I think I was 4, whatever. What's the difference? I'm now 61. That's 57, at least 57 years. The keys don't move. The topography is always exactly the same, no matter what instrument, what piano you're playing. So you don't have to look at it. Why would you look at it? You don't look at the floor when you walk.
Mm.
And so I just, because it's just part of my, I and pianists can do this. You know, if you say to a pianist, put your hands in a position that if we were to stick the keyboard under it, you would be playing a D flat 7. Well, I know exactly, I do this, and if you were to put a keyboard under my hands, a D flat 7 is what you would hear, because my hands are so used to be, just like my mouth is used to talking. It's just what I've done my whole life. So I never had to think about it. As for the other question, I bifurcate my shows. I have commercial shows. I have shows that I do that I make a living doing. Like, I'm sure this show that I end up putting together of the history of the Jews in show business in an hour and 15 minutes. I'm sure that that'll be a show that I can sell, that my manager will be able to sell. And they don't need to know who Mark Nadler is in order to want that show at JCCs and things like that. So there are those shows. That will not be a show where I will want to challenge the audience. That will be a show where I will want the audience to say, oh, I forgot about that. I loved that performer. I love that song, and give them that experience. The shows that I do that are going to supposedly challenge an audience are the, I start those in New York for people like you. And if they are a show like I'm a Stranger Here Myself, which I intended to challenge people with, but it took on a life of its own, and I was able to book it all over the world. And that's the show for which I was nominated for the Helpman Award in Australia. That show had a resonance with people that I didn't expect. So if that happens, then I can book it elsewhere. But I have various reasons for having shows, some to make a living, some to challenge myself, never to challenge the audience, to challenge myself.
Judy, did you have a question? I saw you unmuted.
Oh, me?
It's all right if you don't. I just saw you unmuted, so I wanted to offer you the chance.
Oh, well, you know.
I love seeing you, your picture of you and your 3 dogs. There are only 2.
And there's only 2 now, you're right. And where's Figadoodle? He should be here with us.
He's downstairs watching television. That's my dog.
He's not performing with you? I don't like that.
Not tonight. Not tonight.
Michael, thank you for
Monday. He's only a Tuesday through Sunday performer.
I just have to say that, you know, we can talk about all these varying reasons to perform, but just get Mark out there. He gets us on and up. He keeps us so happy. He takes us away from whatever you're thinking about and puts you in a new, wonderful, uplifting world. And that's what we all need.
Thanks, Judy. What a great
Really, seriously.
Thank you,
I
Judy.
mean, Mark, there's only one of you. Only one.
Thank God.
Thank
Because
God.
2, my mother's already dead, but if there had been 2, she would have died so much.
Lori, did you have a question?
I did actually. My name coming off your lips, man.
Well, you're a great singer. You're a great singer. You're one of those singers that people needs to know, like Meg Flather. I mean, honestly, these are people. I mean, as I say, I've just directed a show for a woman named Lisa Vigiano.
She's in the room.
She's here.
Oh, is she here?
Mm-hmm.
She is such an amazing, I mean, I told her, she is like if Nancy Lamotte and Barbara Russell had a love child. She has Nancy Lamotte's voice and Barbara Russell's verve, Barbara Russell's spontaneity. People need to see her. Mm-hmm. They will regret having missed her. I directed a show for a woman named Celia Burke. Celia has a voice like a cello. People will regret having missed her. Mm. You know, but this is the world we live in. Anyway,
so
I'm sorry.
I have wanted to ask you this question for however many years ago this was, because I think we want an insight into your brain and how you think and how you get from you're nominated for a MAC award and you decide that if you win, you are going to rewrite and deliver the speech that Eve Harrington said when she got the Tony in All About Eve. And that
It was not the Tony. It was the Sarah Siddons Award.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. But I still talk about that. And that was when I think you got on my radar for me as a fan. What the hell made you decide to do that? Because it was effing brilliant.
I'll tell you, Lori, honestly, to tell you the truth.
Wait 1 second. Let me just say what he did was he took the names of the people he wanted to thank. He took that speech and rewrote the names of the people he wanted to thank, but used the words of that speech. Who could ever?
The treacly speech that Eve Harrington gives when she accepts her Sarah Siddons Award at the end of All About Eve, or at the beginning of All About Eve, I think. No, it's at the end.
At the end, yeah.
She's thanking all of the various people of the plot. This is what happened, Lori. I didn't think I had a snowball's chance in hell of winning that award. And my partner at the time said, well, what if you do? You'd better have a speech. I said, you know what? If I win that award, I'll give Eve Harrington's speech from the Sarah Siddons Award.
It was an improvisation. It wasn't written and rehearsed.
No, I mean, it was word for, I know that movie backwards and forwards. I did her speech, but instead of thanking Margot Channing, I thanked Katie Sullivan. Instead of thanking, I just switched out the names because I didn't think I was going to win.
I think that's what's so brilliant about you is that to you, it's just, I just switched out the names, but there was some inspiration there. And that was art. That was art that was.
Well, sometimes you're lucky. Sometimes you're lucky.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you.
Lots of people have their cameras on. If you have a question, please just physically raise your hand in the screen so I can. All right, Donald, let's go to you next.
Wait, Donald, is this Donald Olson?
It sure
Donald
is.
Olson.
All right, I want to tell you something.
Okay.
Donald Olson is a truly great playwright. I had the privilege of directing a play that he wrote about. It's the time that Oscar Wilde and Walt Whitman met when Oscar Wilde first came to this country to go on tour. And it's this extraordinary play. And I had the privilege of directing it. And then Donald wrote a play. He wrote a play for me, a musical. When does this ever happen for anybody in this world?
It happened for you, Mark.
A really extraordinary musical for me. And the musical is about Christine Jorgensen. When she first came back to the United States after her surgery, she had to make a living, so she developed a nightclub act, and she hired this down and out vaudevillian to help her put the nightclub act, and that's the role that he wrote for me. He's a wonderful playwright. It's one of the greatest honors of my life that Donald Olson wrote this play for me.
And I don't have to say anything because Mark just said everything I was going to say. I wasn't going to ask a question, Mark. This was just going to be an appreciation about, Mark did step in. He directed my play. I went to see his show. I was so blown away by this man's talent, not only as a singer, a pianist, and a dancer. I just thought, I have got to write a show. And I found a vehicle, basically, that would, I thought, suit his talents. And
the funny thing is, Donald, every time I say to somebody, this man wrote this musical for me about Christine Jorgensen, they always say, you're going to play Christine Jorgensen?
I hadn't thought of that, and we might get a producer that way. I don't know. Anyway, it's just to say hello, Mark, and I love you so much. And your work is always uplifting, and really, it comes so much from your heart. And what makes you, to me, a truly great performer is just your generosity of spirit. It's just there. It's overflowing all the time. So that's all I'm going to say. Good night. I have enjoyed this so much. And I'll see you hopefully in New York next week.
I look
Thank you for joining us, Donald.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Helene, you had a question.
Helene Bloomfield, who took my those fabulous photographs you see of me, those were taken by, yes.
Thank
by
you.
Nadler.
But I just have to say, I love you. But I'm really excited you perked me up when I heard Houston, because my entire family lives there and they're Jewish.
Oh my God, and they're Jews, right?
What's that?
Are they Jews?
Yeah, of course they're Jews.
Maybe they go to this temple where I'm going to.
I was wondering, but even if they don't go, I'm going to make sure that they all show up.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll come too.
Fantastic.
So I would love to bring my mother to one of your shows.
May.
I think it would be amazing. So
it's going to be in May. It's going to be in May.
And Mother's Day, I have to go around there. Baby.
And in fact, I have a guest.
You know what the synagogue is? Do you know which temple it is? The name?
I'll let you two handle those details off camera.
I'm just really
excited. What's your question for tonight?
That was all I wanted to say.
That was your question?
This is what cracked me up when I got this booking. The reason I got this booking, I've done a lot of concerts singing with symphony orchestras. It's not just me. It's usually a show that's put together. I mean, one time it was just me, but usually it's a show that's put together by a conductor named Jack Everly. And he assembles a Cole Porter evening or an evening of the songs, musical theater songs from Great Britain. And I was part of that. And there's a singer, a fantastic singing actress named Judy McLean. She played the lead in Mamma Mia for a long time and many other roles. She's a great, great singing actress. And anyway, there was this guy also in one of those. She was in one of those shows. She was in two of those shows, actually. There was a guy who was in one of those shows, David Crone, fantastic singer, beautiful blonde boy. Oh, I was so pissed at Judy McLean when she got him. But anyway, then I don't hear from these people. You do shows together and you go your own way. Then my manager calls me. He said, a guy named David Crone wants you to do a show for a synagogue in Houston. He's the cantor. This blonde boy is a cantor? Who knew? And he's a cantor in this synagogue in Houston. He wants you to do a show of the history of Jews in musical theater in an hour and 15 minutes. And he wants your guest artist to be what great Jewish singer? Judy McLean? Judy McLean? Not Jewish. So anyway, she's going to be my guest artist at the synagogue when we do the history of Jewish performers and Jewish songwriters in the musical theater and non-Jewish women singing the songs.
Thank you, Helene.
That's so good. I mean, that's our business. That's our business.
Right.
That's how our business works. People hire who they know and love, and I'm grateful that he knows and likes me,
Lisa, did you have a question? I saw that your camera was on.
Who is it? Lisa Vigiano.
Hi, I actually didn't. I'm doing my homework while I'm watching, but I did want to raise my hand and say, use Mark as your director. Highly recommended. He's just I have no words. That's all I have to say. But and I have all my questions. He's heard. I have many questions, but I don't know. Not right now. They're not coming to me because I'm writing a word list for school.
Well, I'm glad you are here with us tonight. And I'm glad all of you were here with us tonight. We have gone a little over, so it is time to end for the evening. A little bit of housekeeping from the 92Y before we end. Every edition of Cabaret Conversations, we're in our third year now, every edition prior is available for purchase, the recording on the 92Y's website.
We're asking about that.
So if you know people would like to watch tonight's, it should be up by this time next week on 92Y's website, and the recording will be available.
What is the web address, Michael?
Exactly the same as registering for it.
Great.
So you have that in your email. You all registered for it who are here, so you can send that same link out. Every edition is there. Marta Sanders, who was in the room tonight, she's been a guest before. Katie Sullivan, who was mentioned tonight, she was our very first guest in the series back in June of 2020. So please go check those out. Our next two guests to finish out this year, next month I will be joined by Ken Page. And then in December, the great Ken Page. And then in December will be our rescheduled date for Leroy Reams, who I'm thrilled to
Oh,
end the
great.
year with. And I am so thrilled that we've gotten to spend some time tonight and get the stories recorded with the great Mark Nadler. Thank you, friend, for joining this series.
Michael, thank you so much for inviting me. This has been an honor and so much fun. Thank you.
And thank you all for joining us. I will see you next time for 92nd Street Wise Cabaret Conversations. Have a great night.
Okay.